now. Again, thank you all for joining us. For today's webinar, we'll just kind of let people wake their way into the room today, and we'll let them in as they arrive. But my name is Caleb Talley. I'm the director or the executive director of the Startup Junkie Foundation. For those of you who may be new to one of our webinars, Startup Junkie Foundation is a mission-driven organization based here in Northwest Arkansas, headquartered here in Fayetteville, Arkansas. I've got the downtown Fayetteville Square right behind me outside the window. And we are an organization that exists to serve innovators and entrepreneurs, and we do that largely in two ways. And that is through one-on-one consulting meetings with individuals, business owners, entrepreneurs, anywhere from idea stage to $25 million in revenue. And then through events, and everything we do for the community is at absolutely no cost. So whether you have an idea written on the back of a napkin or a full-blown small business, then you've reached a pain point, you need some help with something, that is what we are here for. And we're excited to work with anybody who wants to work with us. And we're excited today to be teamed up with our friends at GrowthX and Max Menke, who's going to bring today's presentation on go-to-market strategies. Max is a founding partner at GrowthX, and this table that I'm using likes to slide up, so I apologize, it's moving on me. He has extensive experience developing and executing data-driven, scalable, and repeatable go-to-market strategies for dozens of early-stage companies across various industries and products. His expertise is centered on building systems, tools, processes, and market messaging for founding teams to exponentially grow revenue and scale sales teams. So without further ado, Max, I will turn it over to you.
Thanks so much, Caleb. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Wonderful to meet you all. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Max Menke. I'm one of the founders here at GrowthX. Really excited to continue our partnership with Fuel and Startup Junkie and the wonderful work they're doing to support founders and entrepreneurs of every stage and industry and ilk. It's a really important job, and one that certainly never ends. As well for ourselves. For those of you who aren't familiar with my company, GrowthX, GrowthX is a seed stage venture capital fund with a really simple perspective. We think entrepreneurs are a lot more successful when they're given the tools and confidence, knowledge, and know-how to acquire customers and grow revenue, or to put another way, before they raise capital from people like us, they raise capital from people that look more like their customers. And that sounds tremendously straightforward, I know. But when you actually look at, as we'll talk about today, the landscape of entrepreneurship, the landscape of startup education, support, ecosystem development, accelerators, university programs, and alike, tend to find that that's a really big problem that many companies have. And that's our unique worldview that we want to, share and help you all demystify today. So as I'm going through this, I'm going to be covering, as much tangible advice and perspective and content as I can. Following up on this, there's actually a worksheet, a template that you can use to take what I'm going to talk about today and actually implement it. What's really important to us at GrowthX is that we don't like to be theoretical, academic, or passive mentors. We are here to do the work with founders. That's what we think is the best form of due diligence. As a fund, we think the best way for us to meet our next investment opportunity is to help our next investment opportunity. So that's why, we partner with accelerators like Fuel, while we run our own accelerator to meet and support startups as a means to invest in them. So, along with a worksheet that we have coming off of this that'll drop in there, also drop a link to our blog, which has tons of great free resources, from venture capital fundraising mini courses to pitch deck, tips and best practices, ideal customer profile templates, just about anything that you could need to get started. We try to provide those things for free as a way to get people to raise their hand and ask questions. And on that note, likewise, if anybody has any questions, I always love for this to be more of a conversation and a presentation. So please feel free to come off mute, fill in the chat box, whatever you'd like. Say hello and ask questions, and love to dive in the details with you all. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and let's get started. So as we're talking about today, finding product market fit and demystifying it, let's just understand a little bit the context around this problem. And again, this is a pretty big problem. It's the reason why I founded GrowthX to begin with. So what do we all know about entrepreneurship? It's hard, right? Really challenging. Oh, well, most startups fail. Okay, how many of them fail? Well, 75% of all funded startups fail. So just because you raised a little bit of capital does not mean that the work is over or that you have significantly reduced the risk to your business. Likewise, 9 out of 10 of all startups fail. So the risk is that most likely you're probably not going to succeed with this business. Now, the challenge that I run into every day, and I work with founders globally, help probably about 3,000 to 4,000 founders around the world trying to grow their businesses. What I tend to see is the number one problem is that we understand that, well, startups are hard and it's hard to keep them alive and a lot of them fail, but most founders don't appreciate what is the root cause or the common causes of failure. Just think about that for a minute. You wouldn't get into your car and not put on a seatbelt. Why do we put on a seatbelt? Because we know that if something bad happens, that thing's going to save your life. We know the cause. We know what happens. We know the chain reaction. Well, for startups and founders, oftentimes we just look at failure as, well, we failed because we failed. We actually don't have to think about it that way. There are a number of organizations, from Carta to Startup Genome to CB Insights to Wilbur Labs to Crunchbase, that run annual, semi-annual, quarterly reports that actually detail the most common causes of startup failure. And 80% of all startup failure has to do with markets and revenue, not your product, not your team. So when you're building and running your startup, zoom out for a minute, take a snapshot of your week. How much time are you actually dedicating towards this problem of product market fit? Put another way, how much time are you actually dedicating to the number one thing that's most likely to end your business? And what I typically see is when founders hold that mirror up to their business, they realize, I'm either not spending nearly enough time, I'm continuing to build a product with the assumption that if I build it, the market will come, or I'm spending time, but I'm not spending that time very thoughtfully. Now, why is it that so many startups are failing because of markets and revenue? It's really straightforward. Most of us are improvising it. What we're talking about is sales, right? Well, there is no sales degree. And if you go to the top MBA or undergrad programs with entrepreneurship degrees in them, you will learn everything you need to learn about fundraising, about building products, about 5-year financial models. They don't cover the very first thing in customer development and go-to-market strategy. Likewise, look at the accelerator market, right? And the programs and the courses that they have. I'm talking about name brand programs, 500 startups, Y Combinator, Techstars, Plug and Play, Alchemist. By the way, I've invested in startups from every single one of those programs. I am a mentor at every single one of those programs. I can tell you that those programs are excellent programs. They've been great mentors, but what they do is they teach you everything about building products and fundraising and almost nothing about raising revenue and building markets. So you come out of those programs, you're ready, you've got some capital, you've got a slightly better sense of what to do with your product, but then you have to actually start growing revenue. And you don't know how to apply your fingertips to that equation. So what do most founders do? They improvise it. We Google it. We look for email campaigns and hacks and subject lines and 5 things I did to accelerate my startup, but we don't really know how to do it consistently. And therefore, most of us, again, 80% of the time when a company fails, it's failing for reasons that are solvable. And so there's a little bit of additional context within here that is particularly important today. For those of you looking to really grow exponential businesses, for those of you really looking to, play in the playground that we play in here as a venture capital fund, meaning you're looking to raise VC, you need to be hyper aware today of what does fundraising look like in 2022. The facts are incredibly clear. Round sizes are going down. Valuations are going down. Term sheets are getting pulled at a rate that is faster than it has ever occurred before. So what does this all mean to you? It's getting harder to raise capital. Why is it getting harder and harder to raise capital? And I'm sure you guys are hearing, well, there's more capital out there than there's ever been before. There's the bigger and badder funds. Absolutely true. But at the same time, 75% of VC funds don't beat the S&P 500. It's a problem. Now, valuations and round sizes have been creeping up for 6, 7, 8 years now. But the failure rate, especially that go-to-market failure rate, has not changed. So your company might have been valued at $5 million at a seed, but now it's valued at $10 million, but it's the same risk factor. Well, to the investor, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because for a $10 million valued company, I expect to get a prospectus, a detailed financial analysis, not a pitch deck and a promise that I'm going to build this product someday. So the point I'm trying to get across to you is, even at the earliest stages of venture, what venture capitalists are looking for is for mature companies that have solved for that most common risk factor. And that most common risk factor is go-to-market execution. The pitch that you have a $17 trillion TAM, that you've got the right people on your board, that you have a stellar product and a stellar team, that is all potential energy, and potential energy is full of risk. What a early stage VC is looking for is kinetic energy, something that's already in motion. You've solved for already the top 2 reasons why any startup fails, which is misreading market demand or running out of cash. If you can protect your balance sheet without the investors and prove that you actually have a repeatable, predictable path to market, then you're going to be able to actually attract them. And the reason why we focus so much here at GrowthX on product market fit and sales and scaling is because when it comes to growing an exponential business, especially a venture capable one, raising capital from VCs is directly related to raising capital from customers. It's a Ferris wheel. You grow revenue to attract and secure investment. It's not about your pitch deck. It's not about your demo day performance. It's about the information that we acquire in that process of due diligence. Once you get that capital in the door, then you use that capital to grow revenue so that you can go fundraise again, and around we go. So that's what we do within our program. By the way, it's, here at GrowthX, we have a programmatic approach to doing all this. We call it the Market Acceleration Program. It's a really straightforward, concept. If we enable you to get to market faster, it creates tangible due diligence and by insights to our fund and other funders looking to work with us. Now, over the course of almost 8 years of accelerating companies and helping them get to market from the earliest stages, as Caleb was saying, I've worked with companies that are back of the napkin ideas all the way up to Fortune 100 companies with new innovations being born out of their company. I've worked with companies in fintech, health tech, martech, retail tech, hardware, software, companies in the US, companies in Canada, Asia, the Middle East, I've worked with companies that are B2B, B2C, semi-autonomous robotic fish that swim underwater and have cameras in their heads and use, AI to detect the health of, coral reefs. And I say all that not to talk about how impressive my background is, but to say I've gone through and accelerated thousands of companies. And what I can tell you from that experience, working with so many people in your shoes, trying to solve for the product market fit problem as a vehicle to raise venture, is this one really simple fact. Products and markets may be unique, but the path to product market fit is not. It's formulaic. It's predictable. In order to acquire customers and grow revenue, every business has to take the same basic steps. And the reason why so many fail is they don't even know what the steps are, and they're improvising the order and the creation and the execution of those steps. Now, don't get me wrong. Just because it's a formula doesn't mean it's easy. Even with the formula, this is still incredibly hard. I always liken it to climbing Mount Everest. Like, you could climb Mount Everest, but if you're going to do it, you might not succeed. But if you were going to do it, you would train, you would hike other mountains, you would bring the right equipment, you would know the right trail, you'd be tracking the weather, you'd bring a Sherpa with you to know the right trails and how do you do it and what's the best timing to do it. Now, what most entrepreneurs do is they try to climb that same Mount Everest and they try and do it with a Patagonia vest on and they bushwhack, completely ignoring the trails, the signs, the weather, and they fail when it's avoidable. And so what we're trying to get into, and again, this concept of product market fit is actually a really good example of a larger problem that exists within revenue generation and even fundraising for a lot of startups. We are so focused on activity-based execution, moving fast and breaking things, that we completely ignore goal-based execution. What I mean by that is let's look at this term product market fit. We're all in search of it, right? You're probably hearing from accelerators or investors like myself asking you, do you have product market fit? Maybe inside of the team, you're having, offsites or all hands talking about, well, we got to find product market fit. Ask yourself for a moment, what is it? How would you know that you have it? What would it actually look like? Because for a lot of us, we're doing a ton of activity to try and get to a destination that we don't even know what it would look like if we got it. And by the way, you can Google what is product market fit. You're going to find about 800 different blog posts. And most of them are going to cite, the same two sources. Half of them are going to cite, Mark Andreessen's definition of product market fit, which is it's the most important thing in the world to a startup. Well, I don't disagree, but that's not a definition. The other half will quote Eric Ries, the author of The Lean Startup. I have absolutely no problem with The Lean Startup. A lot of his methodologies are built into our programming. And his definition of product market fit is if you have to ask if you have product market fit, well, then you don't have it. Well, that is wonderful Twitter wisdom. Fits really nicely in that character limit. But I'm an entrepreneur. How do I build a customer acquisition strategy to that definition? And by the way, we like to put a lot of VCs like myself up on a pedestal and think that they know everything, but I can tell you right now, most VCs don't even know what product market fit really looks like. And by the way, product market fit is completely interchangeable with scale and growth. When we're looking to grow our company, by how much and by when? I don't know. Grow or die. When you don't know what it is you're actually or where it is you're trying to go, all of the efforts that you're trying to execute are wasted motion. It's wasted runway. And then you end up being part of that group where you have failed to get to market to protect your runway and to acquire investors because you chewed through your runway throwing mud at the wall. So how do you do it? how do we actually start executing and finding product market fit? We have to stop throwing mud at the wall. We have to stop improvising. We have to stop moving fast and breaking things. All several ways of saying you have to start being intentional. So again, we don't have to improvise what this looks like. Scientists have been doing this for a long time. As an entrepreneur, your company is just a hypothesis. It's just an experiment. When a scientist wants to run an experiment, they don't take two chemicals, pour them in a jar together, light them on fire and say, okay, we'll see what happens. Because if a scientist does that, they usually, blow up the science department, right? That would be bad. They understand that there's risk there. What does a scientist do when they want to run an experiment? It's fairly straightforward. They study, they research, they plan. Before they put things together, they know exactly how much of chemical A and exactly how much of chemical B and the why behind it. And they know how hot and how long that fire is going to burn for. And before they ever start even doing that, there are two really simple things that scientists do that every entrepreneur can start doing right away. First and foremost, scientists don't bring feelings to a data fight. Sales, revenue, the things that you need to present to an investor to secure capital are data-driven. It's not about trust. It's not about feelings. It's not about market sentiment. Show me the traction. Now, how much traction would a reasonable person need to see to agree with your worldview that you have product market fit? That's going to be a number. It's going to be a specific number of customers at a specific average contract value over a specific period of time. It's not random. It's investable revenue. Likewise, the second thing that any entrepreneur can start doing that scientists do is they come up with a hypothesis before they start an experiment. The hypothesis is just an expected and tangible result that you hope to see by doing an action. Now, again, when we think about most go-to-market strategies, most attempts to find product market fit, it's throwing mud at the wall in the hopes that we see a signal, in the hopes that the path or success will magically reveal itself. That's not really how it works, and you can try it that way, but it's highly inefficient. If you specifically design what the destination is, then that's going to inform the go-to-market strategy, and of all available paths, the ones that are the most likely to succeed to get you a specific outcome. So you need to be hypothesis driven, not just so activity driven in your go-to-market strategy. So what does all this really get back to? And again, I've said this a few times. I think one of the worst pieces of advice to leak out of Silicon Valley is this sentiment that you should move fast and break things, as Mark Zuckerberg once said, right? Let's just be clear about the context around when Mr. Zuckerberg said that. When Mark Zuckerberg said move fast and break things, he wasn't a freshman at Harvard hacking together, Face Smash or whatever it was. He was already backed by some of the wealthiest individuals on the planet. He had no risk in that. Now, for an early stage entrepreneur who only has, friends and family or angel investment, moving fast and breaking things is a surefire way to chew up your runway and to not get anybody to provide you that seed plus round or that bridge round that you're ultimately going to need to say, oh, that didn't work out and I need to slow things down. Again, it's a Ferris wheel. You grow revenue to attract investment. You use the investment to grow revenue. It's a simple machine. So that machine works when you are focused on execution. So who's the best at executing game plans, arguably in the entire world? The US Navy SEALs, at least that's who I like to point to. And they have a really simple saying. The US Navy SEALs saying is slow is smooth and smooth is fast. Now, as you can imagine, that doesn't mean that when the SEALs go on a mission, they're crawling. What it means is that they worry and they consider and they dive into every single detail. They train at an insane level. I'm not talking about push-ups and pull-ups here. I'm talking about to the specific mission They know the day, the time, they know the weather, they know the backup plan, and the backup plan behind that. They know exactly which tools and which tacticians and which team members they're bringing so that they can be the most successful at what they do when the moment comes for them to do it. And they're not improvising. They have a game plan. And the more details they solve for ahead of time, when the variables do come into play, the less they vary and the less impact they have on their actual plan. And so in order to get to market fast, you need to have a process, which takes time to build. You need to have an intent. You need to have a goal. And ultimately, if you have those things, which takes time to build, if you're able to create process to acquire the customers that you want, the way you want to acquire them, and that process is repeatable, that's what unlocks scale. Scale is not a button. Scale is not achieved simply by amplifying activity. You are not a scalable business because you went from a 50-person email campaign to a 500 or 1,000-person email campaign. That's the amplification of noise. A business that scales from a venture capital perspective is one that duplicates and clones successful customer and revenue outcomes. That's what scale is. Again, it's not about scaling activity. It's about scaling revenue, which means scaling sales funnels, which means scaling successful processes for acquiring customers. When we're talking about acquiring customers, we're talking about sales, which I know for a lot of people is a dirty word. And again, most of us, as we jump into being entrepreneurs, have little to no background in sales. Many of us jump into sales or jump into entrepreneurship as someone building a product, but we don't think of it as something that we have to do as founders. It is absolutely part of our role as founders to also be salespeople. So what's the key behind sales? Key number one, take all of those, used car salesman, Cutco knife type stuff, personas, throw them out the window. The key to acquiring customers is to understand that selling is helping. People don't buy products. People look to solve their problems. And the closer you can get to your customer, the closer you can actually understand their business and how your product, your service helps them and solves a problem for them, the more successful you'll be. And that's really the key to product market fit. Who should I help? And the answer to that question is you should help your ideal customer profile, or ICP. Of all the things that any entrepreneur has and needs to have in their toolbox to acquire customers and be ready to raise capital, the most important asset for you, other than a product, is your ideal customer profile. Why is an ideal customer profile so important? By the way, I'm not talking about a persona here. I'm not talking about, millennial men from ages, 35 to 42 that are introverts, that are white collar. That's everybody. That's not an ideal customer profile. Your ideal customer profile is an incredibly focused and tangible group of people who have the highest likelihood of buying your product, getting the most value out of it for the least amount of your effort right now, with the way that your product is structured right now. Now, why is that ICP so important? Your ICP is the single element, the single document, the single asset that impacts every single one of the known steps that every business has to take in order to acquire and grow, not just revenue, but investable revenue. So for example, your ICP, once you know who your customer is, you should be able to understand how much value you create for your customer. Once you know how much value you can create for your customer, that'll tell you approximately how much you can charge that customer. So if I give my customer my product and they're able to make an extra $100,000 a year, I can comfortably take back $25,000, call that my fee. Well, okay then. That then impacts my average customer value, impacts my cost to acquire a customer. I can't spend 200,000 only to get 25 back. Okay. Well, once I know my customer acquisition cost, that informs the channels and the strategies and the people I can use to acquire those customers. And once I understand those channels and those strategies, that's also going to impact the mediums that I can use, whether that be social media or cold email or cold calling or events. And likewise, once I understand who that customer is and what they care about and what they think about and how they're measured, that's going to impact what I say about myself, my business, my technology, and most importantly, how I help them. And all that starts with a really clear understanding of who that ICP is for you today. And now typically, just to really illustrate how big of a problem this is, easily 95% of startups have no or a very underdeveloped ICP. When I talk to startups either entering our program or that are seeking, millions of dollars in investment, I ask them, this is the first question of our due diligence process. Should be a pretty big softball. I mean, should be a beach ball sized softball to toss to a founder. Tell me who is your customer. And the most common answer that I receive, again, 9 out of 10 founders say something akin to moms or manufacturers. Moms is a TAM. And the last time I checked, I don't know anybody walking around saying, hi, I self-identify as a manufacturer. Companies and markets and personas don't buy anything. People do. Until the day comes where robots start buying from other robots, the key to product market fit is to understand that it's not B2B or B2C. It's, as silly as it sounds, it's H to H. It's human to human. Who is the person that is buying your product? So as you're crafting the ideal customer profile, you start with the company. Who are the right companies? What are the right behaviors behind those companies? Within those companies, what's the right department? Is it sales? Is it legal? Is it marketing? Is it HR? Once you're inside that department, you can start to identify the individual, the person who's actually going to make this decision. When you hear that the US Defense Department just signed a contract with Lockheed, when you hear that Oracle just, bought, a 5-year engagement with some company, when you hear that Google, just bought something, it's not that the actual US Defense Department came together and made the decision. Someone who is an economic buyer made that decision, a person, not a series of, characters and fonts and logos. And once you understand and you laser in and focus on who that person is, then you're able to get into their workflow, their keystrokes. How does that person do their job? And in the way that they do their job, what problems that I can solve arise? And if I solve those problems, what's the business impact to them? And so for every business and for every startup, the challenge is, of all potential ICPs, where should I focus my resources? Because as much as we like to focus on the grand opportunity, and believe me, again, I see probably anywhere between 1,500 to 2,000 pitch decks per year. Every morning I wake up to an inbox full of new ones. Every single one of them has the same, slide 12 or slide 17, $12 trillion TAM opportunity. Well, that TAM is really wonderful, but that TAM is full of hundreds, if not thousands, of unique ICPs. And even if your TAM turned on and was banging on your wall right now, saying, give me your product, give me your product, give me your product, you would have the resources to work with all of them because you're a small business. And what would you be forced to do in that scenario? You'd be forced to triage. And as a smart business owner, you would say to yourself, well, of all these people who are banging on my door, who should I work with that's going to be the most successful and give me the most amount of revenue for the least amount of effort? Well, now let's flip it a little bit. Not everybody's banging on your door, but you still have the opportunity to triage and choose the right customers of your TAM. Because it's not about all or anybody who could be Mr. and Mrs. Right. What all of you should be focused on as you're developing this ICP is, who is Mr. or Mrs. Right now? Who can give me that highest amount of traction effort delta, given your limited time, your limited resources, the limited number of at-bats you have in any given day or any given week to actually spend on developing that customer and closing that customer. And every time that ICP changes, your sales process changes, your messaging changes. And oh, by the way, if you want to start, crossing the chasm, as they say, you have to start building like customers. And every time you try and take a customer that's B2C and present it as a use case to B2B, or every time you switch industries and you say, well, look what I did for this, retail group, and I want to bring it to enterprise, they don't match and they don't resonate. And in turn, they don't scale. So what are you looking for in a great ideal customer profile? Well, let's just keep in mind what the goal is. Revenue, right? We're not building personas just for the sake of building it. We know that we're going to start entering a sales process. So in order to get revenue, we're looking for someone who wants to provide us with some of their capital. What does that all boil down to? You should be looking for companies that already spend money on products and services and initiatives like yours in any given market. And again, there are plenty of people who've already talked a lot about this. We're talking about crossing the chasm, innovators, early adopters. Rather than speaking to anybody, who are the people that have a demonstrated track record or a clear and tangible sense of urgency that you can measure to say, this person is a higher likelihood candidate to provide my company with capital in the form of revenue than this person? So let's think of a couple of examples there. One example I like to think of is, imagine you were selling a platform for doctors' offices and clinics, right? So it has telemedicine, it has, appointment scheduling, better health records, easy payments, pretty simple stuff, right? Now, what would you typically do as an entrepreneur? You'd say, well, I just need to start building a list of doctors' offices, right? And let's just say the particular focus of your business was telemedicine, right? Well, that's wonderful, but if you're doing, telemedicine, should you be focused on urgent care and emergencies? Probably not. When you could also be focusing on mental health, where there is a hyper urgent situation that probably needs someone to physically help you with a situation. Just because they're clinics, just because they're doctors, doesn't make them the same. Let's go a level deeper. Okay, so let's just say you're talking about, okay, I want to work with mental health providers, right? Or even therapists. Okay, at some point, in order to acquire customers, you're going to have to go through the process of actually building a tangible list of people to reach out to. Are all therapists the same? How could you tell if they're different? What would be some of the signals to let you know that somebody's more likely to be a buyer than somebody else? Let's just look at their website. If you go to somebody's website, let's just say you have two clinics, and the one clinic has pretty nice, fresh, up-to-date website. They've got, social channels and links to the social channels that actually work. They're posting video content. They're posting blog content. Maybe they even already have a button, to log in for a patient portal. All their blog content is up to date. Everything looks pretty clean and good. Okay, wonderful. Now you go over to clinic number 2. It's kind of an old school looking website. You've seen them. The pictures are kind of pixelated. Their ZocDoc profile doesn't even have a picture. It's just that, the standard avatar. You go to their blog and their last post is from 2019 announcing that they just hired a new, head clinician, but then you look her up on LinkedIn and she's not even there anymore. Their Facebook page clearly was, set up by somebody's nephew as a, little internship project that never really went anywhere. Which of those two clinics and the decision maker behind it actually spends money on technology? Which of those two clinics cares about how their customers perceive and interact and engage with those customers? Which of them care about that experience? Well, obviously the first one. So could you help customer or clinic number two? Absolutely. But if they've never touched their website, if they've never updated that information, that's not an accident. That's a behavior that you would have to work to change. Let's look at another example. Let's just say I was selling, I had a technology for blazing fast Wi-Fi for the airline industry. So crazy fast, you never have to download stuff ahead of time. You can watch videos and download podcasts or whatever, anytime, everywhere, and never breaks down, never cuts out. Okay, so what should I do? Let me download a list of every single entrepreneur and just start every single airline, just start reaching out and saying, hey, do you want better, faster, quicker Wi-Fi? Now, what do you know as a consumer of the airline product and how every single airline treats you? Does every single airline, just because they're flying around basically the same types of tin cans with jet engines on them, treat you the same way? Treat us as customers the same way? Absolutely not. So why would we treat them the same way, right? Their differences in the way that they behave and they treat their customers can tell you a lot about their worldview and how they deploy capital. So, for example, who are the best airlines in the world, right? And if you look it up by most figures, going back 3, 4, 5 years, it's almost always the same list of 4 or 5 airlines that are said to be, the best airlines in the world. You're talking about, United Arab Emirates, Dubai, Cathay Pacific, Singapore Airlines. Usually it's pretty much that group. Now, are those the 4 luckiest airlines in the world? Do they have the airline industry and the rating agencies in their pockets? No. Those airlines get to that position of being the best by investing in their product and their business and their customer experience. Make no mistake, when I mean investing, I mean they spend money on it. I only want to spend time with customers who have a willingness and a track record of spending money, because this is a sales transaction, not a product market fit or an interest transaction. I can't deposit interest in my bank account and then present that to potential investors in the due diligence process, right? So you look at those airlines, when Boeing or Airbus comes out with a new seat arrangement or even an entirely new airplane, those companies fight and battle to buy the first planes before they ever even come off the factory floor, because they see it as a competitive advantage. Now, on the flip side, let's look at an airline here in the US that hopefully none of us are too familiar with, Spirit Airlines, right? Now, Spirit Airlines is not at the top of anybody's list of best airlines to fly, unless you take that list and you flip it upside down. Spirit Airlines, doesn't really care if you enjoyed their flight. They just care that they got you from, point A to point B, your heart's still beating. And if your luggage arrives, they're like, oh, wow, we did a pretty good job today. Now, Spirit doesn't have Wi-Fi on their flights today. And this is where, for so many entrepreneurs, shiny object syndrome and leading with feelings, not data, gets involved. Oh, Spirit Airlines doesn't have Wi-Fi. I'm selling Wi-Fi, so that's a problem I can solve for them. Yes, but why don't they have Wi-Fi today? Because the only logical explanation that would enable you to participate and to sell to them would be if you bumped into the CTO of Spirit Airlines and you said, hey, I noticed that you guys don't have Wi-Fi. I'm selling Wi-Fi. Would you like to buy some? And the CTO would have to then say, hold the phone. The internet in the sky? People have that today? Shut the front door. Of course, the CTO of Spirit Airlines is acutely aware that all of their competitors have Wi-Fi and they don't provide it. They are choosing not to spend money there. So why would you, as an entrepreneur with very limited time, treat Spirit Airlines as an equal opportunity to Cathay Pacific, or Singapore. They are not the same revenue opportunities just because they are an airline. And that level of granular detail can save you months in painful conversations that lead nowhere, email chains that die, conversations that sound like, hey, this was really interesting. Can you send me a little more information? I'm going to run up the flagpole and get back to you. And then, of course, they never do. The level of granular detail that you can get into to each customer will actually significantly accelerate your sales cycles and drive up your conversion rates. But you have to get beyond, again, TAMs or personas. Now, within that, you also need to understand the business that your customers are in. So many people, when they're trying to find product market fit, are fully focused on their product and their business. And when they reach out to a customer, they fail to even understand how their product or their business would impact that customer, or even what their business is, or down to that individual, how that person fits into the machine of their business. And so as you're looking at that ICP, as you're evaluating those ICPs, keep in mind that for B2B, there's only 4 reasons why any business buys, because businesses are hyper rational actors, right? Businesses can't just buy things and think it's fun. They want to throw some cash around. Businesses buy for 4 fundamental reasons: make money, save money, acquire, protect a competitive advantage, or compliance, stay out of jail. So if you want to really get your product to market, you need to be able to tie a direct correlation between your product and your customer's P&L, profit and loss statement. How does your product help them make more money or save money or get that competitive advantage? Because it's not about, we make it easier than an Excel spreadsheet. It's not about, oh, well, you don't have to spend as much time in email. It's the impact of that. What happens when those spreadsheets start talking back to me? How does that information translate into a decision that gets made with real stakes within the building? Now, on the B2C side of things, customers are not rational behaviors or not rational actors. Consumers buy for highly emotional reasons. A great example is an iPhone, right? There are plenty of great phones out there that call and text and email and take photos and surf the web, but people buy iPhones largely because, either it's habitual, for some people it's a status symbol. For me and most other people, all my friends text in blue. And if I'm the guy who starts sending blurry pictures and texting in green, I'm going to get excommunicated from the group chat, right? So it's not the most rational decision, but it is an emotional one. And the example that I like to give of impact and understanding your customers goes to something that most of us see every day, which is pharmaceutical commercials. So just picture in your mind really quickly, an ad for arthritis medicine. When you see an ad for arthritis medicine on TV or in a magazine or something, you don't see a doctor give an explanation of how you take this pill, it enters, your stomach, it dissolves, it goes into your bloodstream, certain types of compound reactions happen and starts attacking the arthritis, in grandma's knees and knuckles. Is that what the medicine does? Technically, absolutely. And by the way, that's most companies' product demos. It's technically sound, it's detailed, but it's not relevant, which is why you never see that. What do you see in an arthritis commercial? You see grandma running through a field on a sunny day with her grandchildren, holding her hand as, a bad wedding band version of, Walking on Sunshine or Happy plays in the background. Why do you see that? It has to do with those companies understanding their customers as people. Grandma doesn't buy arthritis medicine because she has arthritis. That is a misunderstanding of impact. Grandma doesn't buy arthritis medicine because the arthritis gives her pain. Again, that's not the problem. That's not what the arthritis medicine does. And the arthritis medicine also doesn't, solve a series of complex chemical reactions. The arthritis medicine enables grandma to be grandma. Because of the arthritis, she has debilitating pain, which takes her away from doing the things that make her happy. That's the emotional impact. That's the trigger event. It's not arthritis. It's what happens with arthritis and how that changes somebody's delta between who they want to be and, unfortunately, who they are with this disease. And same thing happens over with B2B. Companies don't buy business intelligence or business analytics software. Nobody goes to market saying, I need AI. What they're going to market looking for is saying, I'm trying to find a way to make more money. Oh, this BI software that leverages artificial intelligence enables me to get better data faster in a timely manner so I can make key decisions that don't lag behind, that eventually enable me to make more money. And so it always leads back to what is the core of that business. And then even more focused down, you have to think about not just the business, but the economic buyer, because in every situation, and we like to really overcomplicate it. Well, you've got your champion buyer, you've got multiple decision makers across multiple different departments. At the end of the day, there is always a decision maker. And your job is to understand who is the person who has the ability with their, discretionary budget, with their P&L, to make a decision and invest in your company through revenue. Because that's really what a company is. Companies don't provide a startup, an entrepreneur, your business with capital. That's not the perspective that the company has at the time. What they look at it is it's an investment in themselves. So you need to find who's the person capable with the budget and authority of making that investment. And once you do that, then you need to be able to understand not just their business, but that person's metrics. And so all of this is a holistic approach when you're building this ICP. Again, it's not just about the market. It's about the market. It's about your tools and technology and their readiness. It's about your team and their resources. Hey, it'd be great if you got to $1 million ARR, the standard Series A benchmark. But realistically, you only have the capability to bring on 2 new customers per month at 50 grand per customer. So you've got a long way to go there. So don't set that marker for 1 million, set it for 100,000 or 200,000 and see if you can max out your capacity. Likewise, you need to be keeping in mind your runway. So for example, if your ideal customer profile are enterprise customers and you're trying to go to market selling your first pilot at $250,000. Well, $250,000 will really solve for runway. The problem is $250,000 as your initial pilot, it's probably going to take you about 12 to 18 months to close, which again, doesn't really fit with your runway. So the math of your sales and your sales process will break down. And before you just start going to market, you need to consider all the pathways to get there and what's all the information that you have at your fingertips to say, who should be my customer given all the information, constraints, and opportunities that exist in my business. So just to wrap up a little bit, as you're building that ICP, keep in mind, and this is also going to funnel into the worksheet that I'll put in the chat, and then also send over to Caleb and team. As you're building that ICP, it's a fairly straightforward exercise. You start with an ideal industry. Within that industry, within any industry, who are the ideal companies? How would you identify that a company is a better fit from all companies? Because as we talked about before, you need to be able to triage and focus on the opportunities where you have the highest likelihood of success. Once you identify those companies, which department do you need to focus on? Once you're in those departments, now you can start figuring out who are the decision makers within that department. And the most important thing that you do at this stage is you must be able to tie a direct line, a direct correlation between what your product does and how that person is measured. Because universally, every single one of us who are employed, we have measurements, we have ways that our productivity or our success is tracked. And you don't have to guess what this is. You can find for every single person how they're measured. It's called LinkedIn. Jump onto LinkedIn. Once you know what that title, that role is within that specific industry, go read the profiles of 25 or 50 of these people. Read those profiles. They'll tell you in incredibly clear detail what they are charged with accomplishing. And if you can't find clearances there, you don't even have to leave LinkedIn. Go click the jobs button and you can find people who are hiring those people. And then the job descriptions, they'll give you even more excruciating details about exactly what they're looking for. And again, it's not B2B or B2C, it's H to H. Your product has to help somebody with something that's a priority to them. Because if you're helpful to them, but it isn't a priority, you're never going to get anything more than their interest. Well, this is really great, but my job is not to buy your product. I have 4 or 5 main jobs, and every quarter or every year, I sit down with my boss and they're given a sheet of paper that has 3 or 4 numbers on it. And those numbers are either good or bad. And that's either going to affect my bonus, my compensation, maybe my job and my livelihood. And when you get down to that specific customer detail, I mean, really that bone marrow of who that person really is and what you do for them, that's when you'll actually start speaking their language. You price it the right way, you'll target them, and you'll actually see sales accelerate. And the last 2 points I'll make as we wrap up, because I know we're close on time, is this. Point number 1, it's not what you do. It certainly is not what your technology does. It's what you do for your customers. Nobody wants another product demo. Nobody cares about the accelerator that you came out of, because most customers don't even know what an accelerator is, right? It's not a knock against you. It's just not part of their worldview. What they really want to know is, I need help. How can you help me, right? It's fairly straightforward. Now, you can't even begin to answer the question of how do you help your customer or what you do for them if you haven't defined who they are. So you have to know who your customers are. And again, the wider that aperture, the more generalist you are in your customer, the weaker that statement of how you help is going to be. Which brings me to point number 2. If you want to be successful helping your customers and you don't have a lot of experience in sales, that's totally fine. All of us have many years of experience as customers. And just think about it briefly for a moment. If you were an enterprise customer, if you were a business for a second, and a young company came to you and you asked them, hey, tell me what my job is, or even simply tell me what my business is, and they couldn't answer that question, would you buy something from them? Probably not. And one of the simplest but biggest changes almost every single startup can make is to start selling to their customers the way they would want to be sold to. The way you would actually respect somebody saying, I'm helpful to your business because I know your business. Meet your standard as a buyer and then match it as a seller. And as soon as you start doing that, you realize that all past revenue lead to being customer-centric, being human-centric, not market or persona-centric, but really getting into the details of, listen, I actually know you and I know your business and I know the trends within it and I can consult with you. And that's why the problem I'm here to solve is X, and the way I solve that is my technology. And frankly, you don't really care about my technology. What you care about is you and your problems. And as soon as you can start matching your revenue behaviors with your revenue beliefs and wants, the sooner you'll be able to achieve product market fit. So I know we're just about up on time. That's right on the dot. As always, happy if to stay if anybody has any questions. But again, thanks so much. We'll be getting another thing started soon, of course, as we get things going, or as you're checking things out, you can certainly take a look at our site, growthx.com. I also just dropped some information about ideal customer profiles. And there's a document and a spreadsheet in there. And again, we've got tons of great resources on our website, growthx.com. So thank you everybody for listening. And again, happy to stay if anybody has any questions.
I'll start us off by just saying thank you so much, Max, for this this workshop. It's been fantastic. Getting a lot of good feedback in the chat already, I see. But yeah, excuse me. If anybody has any questions, we won't shut it down just yet if someone wants to throw a question his way. Well, if not, then we will go ahead and wrap it up. Yeah. It's a good sound of a good presentation, Max. Answered everybody's questions. Awesome. Well, we will be sending out this video link in a follow-up email to everyone that registered for the event. And we look forward to seeing you at the next one. And Max, again, thank you so much for this presentation.
Yeah, thanks, Caleb. Have a great rest of your week, everyone.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.